Welcome to the Morgan Hill Chamber of Commerce Economic Development and Government Relations Committee meeting. I am Rick Kent. I'm the co-chair of the Economic Development and Government Relations Committee, along with Larry Carr, who's also on the phone. Let's do a virtual around the table just so that everybody can introduce themselves so we know who's here. I see some new faces. Let's start with Alex.
Hi, good morning, everybody. Alex Kennett, Open Space Authority and local commercial realtor.
And Joe.
Resident and member of the Morgan Hill Planning Commission.
Mario.
Mario Banuelos, board member for the chamber.
Jeff Perkins.
Yeah, Jeff Perkins with Heritage Bank.
Heather.
Good morning, Heather DeRosa with Morgan Hill Unified School District. I work in the Transition Partnership Program and Workability.
Thank you. Armando.
Good morning, Armando Garcia with Dicard Networks, IT Services.
John Horner.
Morning, everyone. John Horner, School Board President, Morgan Hill Unified School District.
Quinita.
Hello, good morning, everyone. This is Dr. Quinita Fernandez. I practice homeopathic alternative medicine. It's a telemedicine here in Morgan Hill. Thank you for having me.
Welcome. Marby. Marby, you're muted.
There we go.
Oh, I turned it off. Marby Lee, I'm a local realtor here in Morgan Hill with Real Brokerage.
And Larry.
Good morning, everyone. Larry Carr. I'm on the board with the Chamber of Commerce, and I'm with the Boys and Girls Clubs of America.
Hi, our presenter, Nikki.
Hey everyone, thanks for having me on today. Happy to meet you all in person. Nick speaks very highly of his chamber members, and so it's good to finally be here with you and brief you on some of the things that are going on at the federal level. With that, let me know if it's time to start, Nick, or...
Let me just continue around the table
here.
Oh,
the horn. Okay,
and then
perfect.
Then we'll start. Nick, do you want to introduce yourself?
Good morning, everybody, and welcome. And Nick Gage, CEO and President of the Morgan Hill Chamber of Commerce, and it's my family, small business owner in Morgan Hill as well.
Vanessa. You're on mute, Vanessa.
Sorry about that. Vanessa Hagt, Vice Principal from Stratford School.
Brittany Sherman.
Morning, everyone. Brittany Sherman, Economic Development Coordinator for the City of Morgan Hill.
Steve Tate.
Yeah, I'm Steve Tate. I'm a community volunteer.
Rosarin.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Rosarin Bootsaborg here from the Santa Clara Valley Water District, Office of Government Relations.
And Emilja?
Yeah, Coach Church. I'm IT services, web development, and a musician. So,
welcome, Ken.
Yes, Ken Meager, Pinnacle Bank.
Florencia.
Hello. This is Florencia from Florencia Joe Design.
Welcome. Steve McFarland.
Hi, good morning. I'm on 2 Zooms. I'm with the Chamber, and I'll keep a low profile.
Okay, Christina.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Christina with the Gilroy Chamber of Commerce, lead membership and marketing.
Welcome. And Brooke.
Good morning. I'm Brooke with the Chamber of Commerce, Director of Events and Sales, and musician as well.
Well, thank you, everybody, for attending, and welcome. And today we have Nikkie Nguyen, who is a Government Affairs Manager for the Western region of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. Nikkie, I'm going to let you take it away. And you're muted, though, right now.
Oh, that always
there
happens.
You go.
Let's see if I can share my slides.
Yeah, you should be able to, Nikki.
Perfect.
There you go.
Wonderful, and we'll do start slideshow.
Well, as Nikki pulls up a presentation, she will be sending it to us, so we can go ahead and forward that to anyone on the phone who would like to have it.
Yes, perfect. Oh, do you all see my screen still? Oh,
There we go.
There it is.
Yeah.
okay. Well, now, but I can't see my notes now. Let's see how we can do this. Could still see annotations. I'm sorry, all. I just came back from DC, and so just trying to get this all figured out. Well, we should be. But yeah, I can't see my notes. Would you mind if you all just kind of bared with me here, and then I'll
Sure.
I could expand this way.
That's good.
Okay, perfect. So my notes are here at the bottom, but just to put it simply, we're kind of like the district directors of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Lobbying Division out in DC. And so are really key priorities in our specific region is to build and nurture relationships amongst our local chamber partners, and also to build those relationships here at home with all of our legislatures throughout California, Arizona, Nevada, Utah, and Hawaii. So huge region. I like to say it's the most beautiful region, but I'm a little biased being that I'm from California. And so with that, we'll go ahead and jump into the actual presentation. We're going to really walk through the recent news and issue updates, our pro-growth policy outlook, and kind of what our legislative priorities are. And then we'll jump into the conclusion here. Really, the reason why I wanted my notations were more for the data-based stuff. So as you all know, tariffs are a huge concern amongst small businesses in particular, but just the business environment in general. So I wanted to provide kind of this scale for you all to see in terms of how we measure uncertainty. This is our big concern as well. We're hearing this from a lot of businesses with just the political and economic climate right now, and the conversations that are being had as it pertains to the tariff conversation. I think it's really important to note that the position that we're taking and we're encouraging all of our local partners to take is that tariffs are a tax on consumers. This will all trickle down to you just because as businesses really try to navigate this uncertainty, they also have to plan, and that also means increased costs to no fault of their own. And so really on this particular graph, what you're seeing is the news cycle since the tariff announcement. And so you're starting to see this spike, and that's how we measure that uncertainty there. And it's really no surprise that, you know, this conversation has been on all of the earning calls, and it is the top of mind for most people on the Hill as they try to, you know, fight for exemptions or at least some clarity, which doesn't seem to be as promising as we'd like right now. And so with that, we're really focused on the trade policy discussions. We are tracking like the back and forth between you know, what's getting put out at the White House and this administration. And so we're also tracking these negotiations, as you all know, since I think May, we said that there was going to be, I think it's actually April, we said that there was going to be this 90-day pause and space for the administration to start negotiating with about over 75 different countries, or 78 countries. And so we're really trying to track those negotiations and what comes out of it, but then also the retaliations that come from that have been coming from Canada, China, and then also Mexico, which for you all in California 18th, your top trading partner is Canada and Mexico, and actually surprisingly Ireland as of 2023, which is our latest data on tariffs for that district. So really, I think I had some additional notes here on what exactly the the Canadian tariffs and EU tariffs impacted, which was like American beef, poultry, bourbon. As you know, Canada was pulling Kentucky bourbon off their shelves, peanut butter, jeans, so a vast array of things. And I think what's important here is that in that 90-day pause, we don't really know like what these negotiations will look like right now. I think the UK has come out with kind of a general plan, but not necessarily in agreed negotiations as they continue to work out all of the kinks. But I do know that with the UK, there have been some good outcomes in that we have made some of the trading amongst automobiles a little bit more accessible in that plan, but they're still working out some of the kinks. And actively working that out. And then we are actively working with the EU right now, but there has been no real updates on that. And then, as you all know, in terms of China, we had an agreement in Geneva that they would kind of keep the tariffs at the 10% instead of previously the 145% or the 160 where it was. So with that, we'll jump into our very California specific data. We have in California, our top export partners or our top trading partners are Mexico, Canada, and China. So all the countries that are top of mind here. And really, when it comes to trade, we have in California alone, it makes up 5.1 million jobs. And in terms of our overall economy, it makes up 368 billion in goods and services. And so understandable that Californians are very concerned right now, and even you're starting to see this trend of the state government attempting to take action against these tariffs as well. And I think there's very specific data on your congressional district. So here, your congressional district in California's 18th is home to about 15,000 businesses, all of which are S-corps. And I wanted to make this a little interactive, so I'll hide this little note for you all, but I'm just curious to know what you all think your top sector is in your congressional district. You're welcome to raise hands or unmute.
Maybe in the IT world or advanced manufacturing, one of the two.
Yeah, absolutely. So as you could see here, your top two exports are computer and electronics, but also management and consulting services, which makes up the 19 million of California's exports for like things like royalties and license fees and telecom and information services. So with that, we've really fought against the impact of this tariffs conversation. As I mentioned, approximately 56% of all U.S. imports are raw materials and components that we don't either have access to here, like coffee beans, is a big one. Bananas, avocados, our famous avocados in California that we love. Those are things that we don't necessarily have an abundance of all year round. And so that's the kind of the importance of like our trading partners. And so, or the other thing is they're too expensive to make or have here in our country. And so currently, that's kind of like where our economy stands on these particular partnerships that we have with Canada, Mexico, and other partners. It does become a question of, I guess the reason why I stand here with you all today is the question of like, so what does this all mean? And to be frank with you, it really is too soon to tell in the regard that in that 90-day pause, as these negotiations are coming out sooner than the 90 days in some cases, in between and sometimes in between this range. I don't imagine how they'll reach agreements within that 90 days for 78 plus countries. But that, in my view that could be optimistic thinking, or they could totally surprise us. So in some ways, what we think is going to happen in that 90-day period, which ends on July 9th, is they could either extend or they could continue and just let it fall over and just have the continued original tariffs take play. And so that's the concern. We're trying to be optimistic here. We're trying to look at the silver lining, and that seems to be the theme of all things. And we are hoping that they do reach mutual negotiations that benefit both trading partners in this conversation. But with that in mind, kind of where we are as tariffs stand today, we are estimating that it will leave American households $4,000 poorer every year. And so we are very big advocates on the fact that we want to remain competitive in this market as U.S. manufacturers. Are very concerned that some of our trading partners are turning away from the United States and looking for trading partners elsewhere on some goods. And so we want to make sure that we're protecting kind of our economy in this regard. And so we'll, again, in terms of the overall impact, though, we're really, because there's so much that we don't know at this point, we're kind of in this wait and see. But I just wanted to present you all with the data that as it stands right now, this is what we're looking at. And then if you haven't been tracking the tariffs, no worries. We've kind of done that for you here in this slide. As you can see, steel and aluminum, it's kind of like PTSD, right? Because you all had this on the news. But as you can see, steel and aluminum was scheduled on March at that 25%. And then we also had that increase on June 4th at 50%. You could see automobiles here, the impact of copper, pharmaceuticals and imported semiconductors. There was a threat issued, but no specific numbers just yet. And then, like I said, as it pertains to Canada and Mexico, we're at that 25% tariffs on all USMCA compliant goods. And that hasn't changed just yet. And then in China on May 12th, both countries, like I said, declared a truce in Geneva. And so that'll lead me to the next slide here. We also wanted to provide a retaliation update so that you all can kind of track what's going on between the major companies and major countries and our trading partners. And so, for example, in Canada, this is what your 25% applies to. And we also have the 50% on metals. And then in the EU, we still have that 50% as well, and then how it impacts other goods. And then obviously, like I said, in China, on the retaliatory tariffs on US goods dropped. It dropped from 10% from the original 125. But I think because of the existing tariffs that we had prior in 2017 or 2018 during President Trump's administration that carried through the Biden administration, they were actually at 145. So you'll see that number throughout, the news or whatever you've been following in that regard. And so I also wanted to provide this to emphasize really the economic uncertainty. I think it's really important to note that businesses need certainty in order to make plans. I'm sure you're all feeling the brunt end of that. And so that really is the truth. That's really what we've been advocating on the Hill and in the White House, is sharing small businesses' stories, especially because even though some of our members are these big box stores, and maybe perhaps some of Morgan Hill members are here as well, it's really the small businesses that kind of don't have the time to navigate kind of the back and forth, but then also they don't have time to have and store ships ahead of time and to have access to those goods ahead of time. And so they're really going to be kind of facing the brunt end of this tariff conversation, if they haven't already. And so next, I kind of just wanted to move from tariffs and talk more about what's happening with the economy. I'm sure you all have been following what's happening with reconciliation and that conversation. But the U.S. Chamber is very focused on keeping our annual growth at 3% and making sure that there are policies that really foster that economic growth. We think that that's what makes a healthy economy. And so we go into the famous HR1. It could be the one big beautiful bill or one big ugly bill, depending on however it's labeled, but it is HR1. And it really falls into the reconciliation package. And really the key here is that, look, you guys, I didn't even need my notes. Like I don't the really big key here is the 199A deduction. As I mentioned before, you had 15,000 businesses in California's 18th congressional district. And so this really impacts anything that's not a C Corp. And you basically, what we're calling for, I guess basically what came out of this bill is what we were advocating for was the maintenance of 20%. What we got was an increase to 23%, which I think is going to be, which we think is good news for these Main Street businesses. We were also advocating to maintain the 21% corporate tax rate, which we see in this bill. And then we also were advocating for tax incentives, especially for R&D, which I think greatly impacts your California congressional district as well, amongst other things. And so I have some additional notes here. Obviously with reconciliation right now, it sits in the Senate, and we really don't know what's going to come out of it. We really don't know what edits are going to be made as it moved from the House to the Senate. I always like to note that Senator Thune only can afford the 3 votes here in the Senate, and then before it moves over to the House. And I know that the overall deadline for Republicans, as they kind of come to an agreement amongst themselves, is to meet a July 4th deadline. I think now that they're finally realizing that that might be a very ambitious deadline amongst themselves, especially as there are growing concerns over the Medicaid cuts, SNAP, and things like that. And I think that they're just it's kind of like a puzzle. I think they're just trying to figure out what works in this big bill. These are just some graphs that we calculated in 2017 after President Trump's first, Tax Cuts and Jobs Act initiative, and how it's benefited our economy. And so we really want to carry that into our vision of the continued growth, economic growth at 3%, and how it plays in how this tax conversation in particular plays into our economy. And so this graph kind of shows you that and gives you that insight on what we've been advocating for, even before we knew that this would be the administration's second term. And then really lastly, as we continue this tax conversation, like I said, we were advocating for the Main Street Tax Act, which is that 20% deduction that was just transitioned to the 23% as it passed out of the House. We were able to keep that corporate tax rate at 21%. We were advocating for B-SALT as well. I think I have those numbers there. And then R&D. And we were also advocating to make this conversation permanent so that we wouldn't have to face this every 5 to 10 years and kind of go through this process over and over again. We wanted really something for businesses, again, like we said, right, with those graphs, is our businesses need certainty at a time of uncertainty more than ever. I think we're realizing that. And so we want to maintain that level of certainty by making by calling for this current policy baseline and making this permanent. Again, I think that the July 4th deadline is optimistic. If we don't renew some of these provisions, what our economists have calculated is that this will lead to $4 trillion in losses, just because this tax conversation will benefit our economy and bring that money back. And so that's how we see that. I think I wanted to kind of brush over some of the data into your district specifically, but like I said, in your congressional district, there are about 15,000 businesses. And so, like I said, most of those businesses are the S Corps, but of those businesses, there are 109,000, over 109,000 businesses that claimed that 20% deduction in 2023, I believe is our latest data. At the 23%, we're estimating that it'll bring back into the economy 13.4 million worth of deductions. And so that's really money for these businesses to reinvest in their operations and in their workforce. And we see that as good news. It's the same with R&D. We see that as an opportunity for businesses to reinvest in their operations and really produce faster, which is how we kind of measure the economic impact here. With that, I'll conclude, but really there's no greater place to be at this time, in this time of uncertainty, than in the chamber world, where chambers are really the conveners and the problem solvers behind all of this. I hope that, you all kind of have some level of clarity as to what's going on in the conversations that are being had in DC, but I wanted to thank you all, for having me today.
Well, thank you, Nikki. Let's take questions. I'm sure we're going to have a few of them. John Horner.
Good morning. Thank you for the comprehensive overview. I think you're trying to make insanity seem sane.
Yeah. I mean, that's the only way we can do it and have fun with it as well, right? So.
But I just wonder if the chamber has taken a position on the business consequences of immigration, both legal and undocumented. We have industries in California like agriculture where 40 to 50% of the workers don't have documentation and are now, living in great fear. And we all know if they're all gone tomorrow, food supply becomes a massive issue. There have been many attempts over the last. Ronald Reagan was the last one to actually pass immigration reform. It's something his Republican colleagues don't talk about because they hate him for it, in my opinion. But is the chamber, the U.S. chamber, leaning into that issue, both on the labor supply side and the demand side? And then another piece is the vast majority of these folks are paying Social Security taxes with numbers that aren't theirs, which go into a fund which is used to pay everybody else. So they will never collect funds out of Social Security, but are paying in. So this is a massive issue that's been a political punching bag for a long time, probably longer than you've been alive. Certainly my whole life, and I'm 64, and I just wonder where the U.S. Chamber is at on that topic.
Yeah, I obviously understand your concerns. I think immigration has, yes, long been talked about. They've been advocating for reform, and everybody says reform, but nothing really comes of it. I think where the U.S. Chamber stands on this is that we're very pro immigration. I think that we're really going to need it as we look at our workforce numbers. I don't have that slide in this slide today, but I'm happy to send that to you all, where we have a graph of the declining birth rates here in the United States. And so we'll have a real workforce issue that we'll have to address in terms of filling job needs as it is already, right? As it stands already. But I think, and we want to be very clear that we're very supportive of legal immigration and calling for the reform to make it employers have more access to that workforce pipeline. So we are advocating for access to visas, and even if it's seasonal worker visas. But I think in the climate and in the situation, the political climate and the situations we're facing right now, our primary focus has been more on the economic conversation, and that'll definitely come into play once we have more certain language after this conversation that we're all having on the Hill with this reconciliation package.
Okay, thank you. Alex, you have a question.
I do, thank you. I've always relied on the chamber, starting with the U.S. Chamber on down, to be the communicator, the liaison between the government and the business community. And now that this administration seems to manage by confusion, how has that relationship changed, or has it changed? Is the U.S. Chamber able to be a factor with this administration, or does it really matter anymore?
I think the U.S. Chamber, since we were founded in 1918 by President William Howard Taft, we have always been kind of that convener, that middle, kind of that voice for business policy and what might work based off of our thousands of board members. And the businesses that we represent, from small to large and all kinds of industries. We've been very vocal to this administration and to Congress about the overall impacts. I mean, the data that we were able to provide today is just a part of kind of what we do for business, the business community, and how we offer that data to government in order for them to either change their minds or really just start conversation. And so while we're still continuing this route where we're going back and forth on these negotiations, we still do have a very active presence with this administration and on the Hill. So hopefully that clarifies kind of what we're doing. I mean, our main job and priority is really to advocate on our local chamber's behalf and then also on our business members' behalf.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Nick.
Yeah. Well, first I want to thank Nikki for presenting this morning. You know, our chamber here in Morgan Hill now is really starting to integrate our voice with Nikki and her team, and so I'm thankful for that as we start to ramp up over the next 2 years. Nikki, before I forget, if you could also then, in addition to the current deck, send that job sector report out as well, that would be helpful. I don't know if it's broken down by job sectors, but if it is, that would also be helpful to understand as we start to wrestle with this workforce development and where we are going in the future. I mean, just a quick example, if we take a look at healthcare and our nursing force, depending on the reports you read, we're about 1.2 to 1.4 million short of nursing as it stands today, which will have a great impact to all of us as it relates to our future healthcare. And the immigration, obviously, discussion that we're having plays a pretty heavy hand in that as overseas nurses are coming in to be able to fill those gaps. So that report would be helpful. The other two things that I'd just like to note is that California has a small business, through CalChamber, a small business policy advocacy center, and I'm fortunate to sit on that board. And as we start to reorganize. In fact, I just received information yesterday on somewhat of a reorganization of that policy council. And we need to stay connected with that to make sure that the voice here in Sacramento is also being heard. And along with that, what can we be doing here at a local level to be able to help you as relates to your advocacy efforts as far as this business uncertainties here, information that we'd like to share. Let's obviously follow this conversation up with some personal discussions on how we can take a look at what the Morgan Hill Chamber can do as it relates to our 500 businesses, how that can support a voice to on your end, just to make sure that we have at least an opportunity to contribute where we are here, not just in Morgan Hill, but Santa Clara County, and more importantly than how that looks upon the greater California base of issues here that we're wrestling with today.
I think in terms of what it looks like is it starts with you all. We're collecting stories. We're actively collecting stories to carry that in our negotiations and discussions on the Hill and at the White House. And so if you have business owners that are willing to share their stories on how tariffs are impacting them, we've collected hundreds of them throughout the country. That'll help put Morgan Hill on the map as well, on our radar, but also it will help, like when we're sitting down with Congresswoman Lofgren and perhaps other Republicans in California to kind of amplify their voice when they're advocating against these tariffs.
Well, Rick and Larry, maybe we can get together in the very short near future here and talk about that. I met with our mayor yesterday with two of our advanced manufacturers here in town, and obviously hearing their input and their concerns and some of the opportunities they see down the road. Obviously, it's important to share. So we can take a look at circling our troops here. We'll work obviously with the city. Brittany, I see Brittany on the line, as well as economic development. We can pull together, some of the messages we like to send as a part of who we are here in Morgan Hill as well, Nikki.
Perfect. And then I will say, like I think in recent news, we've been very vocal about small business exemption. Just as I've provided you all the data and the overall impact, it's very hard for these small businesses to plan, and so they're really feeling the weight of it. Any more questions?
Any other questions for Nikki?
It could be about anything. There's a lot going on in DC. It seems, I was just sitting down with, not sitting, I was sitting in an Uber, and he was like, talking about all this craziness that's happening. And I was telling him we all have to be a little bit crazy to be in this too. So,
So I guess from a business perspective, clarity with respect to tariffs is really important to understand that and understand the impact on our businesses. Legal immigration is also an issue, especially for agriculture and a few other kinds of industries around. The tax law, to the extent that it is pro-business and helps businesses out, particularly in the R&D area, I know is something that advanced manufacturing companies appreciate quite a bit and utilize. Any sense of the chamber taking a position on the overall deficit spend? You're talking about a $4 trillion tax cut, but when you look at the data, apparently it's going to end up causing the deficit to go up about $2.4 trillion over the next decade. Anything that the chamber thinks about that deficit spend?
Yeah, so we're actually, so I think in terms of the 2.4 trillion deficit, I think that number is going around from the Congressional Budget Office and that estimation. I think what we're looking at from an economic standpoint is because of the benefit of the money that goes back into the economy, we are predicting that actually isn't the number. And so our team has been very vocal about that and opposed to that kind of conversation. We're also to just be real with you here, we don't want, to increase our deficit. That's not something that, I think we wouldn't be doing our job if that's what we were a proponent of. So I think that that's why it is our concern that if these businesses don't get reinvested and to support faster economic growth, like I said, things like R&D, that's going to lead to higher production, right? And so that contributes to the growth of our economy. And so that's kind of what we're looking at and that in itself is kind of hard to measure numerically in terms of how that will positively impact the economy, but we already saw the positive impact from its implementation in 2017. And so that's why we're confident that in terms of that 2.4 trillion number, that's not what it'll actually look like. And so I think hopefully that answers that question. But obviously when it comes to the deficit, we don't, like I said, we're very concerned with that conversation. They're not having that now as they're focused on this reconciliation package alone. But hopefully once this reconciliation passes through, it'll be a little bit easier when they come in to talk about spending and budget, though they'll have to do that with the Democrats this time. So it'll be really interesting and rocky road these next few months for sure.
Does the U.S. Chamber have any guess as to what that number might be given the current items in the bill?
In terms of the
2.4 trillion, is it, do you think it's going to be 1 trillion? Any ideas at all?
Our team might be working on those numbers now, but I'll have to double check, and then I will send that to Nick for sure and loop him in with our tax policy and our economists at the U.S. Chamber.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Nikki?
Nikki, as it relates to the tariffs, of course, tariffs can be used in a positive way to bring manufacturing and whatnot to the state, but but obviously not done in such a volatile way. But based on what has already occurred and the research that the U.S. Chamber has done in California, what industries and categories of businesses have actually benefited currently at this time? And then with your forecasting, what businesses could potentially benefit down the road, if anywhere at all?
So I think because of our economic reports that we've had so far, we can't really see in quarter one that actually was some residual from the Biden administration and into the start of the Trump administration. And so it didn't quite factor in the impact of the tariffs just yet. And so really, now that we're in Q2, we're really going to start to see this impact of how, how it looked on the business community. And so I don't have clear answers for you right now, just because that economic report has not come out. I will say the economy on its own in recent reports has shown, there's a lot of talk about inflation and a recession, and I'm sure that there's concern about that, especially as these tariff conversations proceed. But I will say some of the data that has come out, I think last month, was that the economy actually wasn't doing as bad as we perceived it to be, and actually inflation was down at a rate that was lower, that has not been this low since 2021. Now, we don't know, again, if that credits to this tariff conversation or if that'll, factor in and look different in this next quarter. So, it's really hard to say, what this will all look like, especially as negotiations are still coming out, Christina.
Thank you. And then as it relates to small businesses, what sort of exceptions, can you elaborate a bit more about what the U.S. Chamber is looking at, or could benefits could possibly come in that area?
As it relates to the tariff conversation, the tax conversation?
Tariffs.
How do we see this benefiting small businesses?
Like, what kinds of exemptions could be made for small businesses that you all are exploring?
Yeah, we're just calling for overall exemptions. It's broad exemptions, because we know that there's a lot that they're facing in terms of all of their imports and the goods that they're exporting as well. And so we know that they're the brunt end of this negotiation conversation, and that's what we're really pushing for, is that there is a broad exemption for these small businesses, so that they're not having to really, I guess, carry the bag while these negotiations are coming through.
And Nikki, just as a follow-up to that, what's the likelihood of that actually getting to done? I mean, what are we looking at here as far as timeframes? I know, talking with two of the manufacturers yesterday, they're looking at a pretty stressful 2025, hoping obviously for a little bit of a glimmer of hope in 2026. But with the uncertainty in front of them right now, it's just so hard to have any predictability. But those exemptions really could help and could really kind of lower the stress rate right now that are on all of our shoulders, whether you're a 25 employee business or a 500 employee business as it relates to how you classify small businesses. But is there a likelihood of any of that really happening in the near future, or is that also really a couple quarters down the road?
It's hard to answer that with clarity, to be honest. In the theme of uncertainty, we're also facing uncertainty. It's hard to tell you what agreements will come out of this and what conversations will be had of this. Again, the answer is we don't know. It's too soon to tell. I don't know if they'll, change their minds in terms of after they see the numbers in terms of the impact on small businesses, if they'll make those exemptions, and I don't know when, but we have been sending them, impact reports, economic reports as well, just for their knowledge. But I think what we want to be very clear on is we are very opposed to the blanket tariffs at the U.S. Chamber. We obviously, on Christina's note, is we can see the benefit of some tariffs, but I think like in this level of we're just putting an overall, broad-based tariff on all of these countries that in the middle of these negotiations is where it becomes very problematic.
Okay. Again, I don't see any other questions. Nikki, thank you very much. Nick, you gotta.
I'm sorry, Rick and Larry, I just had a thought here. I'm wondering, we do have a couple deadlines that we know are coming to term. One of them is the July 9th deadline as relates to the pause. Nikki, if you'd be comfortable, maybe we could have you back, sometime after that pause, just to get a little bit more of an update based on hopefully some a better level
Clarity.
yeah, better level of clarity after that. So maybe we can kind of target August, for a recap, depending on kind of where situations stand. But I think it would be good if you're comfortable to keep pulse with us here. It would be helpful, certainly for our members, to be able to hear directly from the U.S. Chamber on opportunities that they may be able to take advantage of. So Larry and Rick, if you're comfortable with Nikki, we can maybe have you come back in August to do another status update.
I
Yeah,
think that would
absolutely.
be
And hopefully,
fantastic.
sorry, and hopefully we'll have some clearer answers and and I'll try to get my presentation slides to you before. I was in DC the first the last week of May, and then Sacramento, and then DC again. So we've just been bopping around everywhere, and I was only home 2 days last week. So thank you all for bearing with me and working through the technological aspects of this and kind of being a part of this conversation. I think we're having these conversations because of you all, and so hopefully there are some good to come of this as it pertains to small businesses and the organizations and the companies that you all represent.
And Nikki, thank you for making time for the Chamber, Morgan Hill Chamber.
Thank you.
Okay, with that, why don't we take just a couple minute break, maybe a 5-minute break, reconvene and do quick status updates from a couple of people around the table. So let's reconvene at about 5 to 9, and then we'll have a good 15-minute discussion.
Good.
Okay, thank you so much for your help.
Okay, shall we get back, reconvene, and have a few updates? And why don't we start with Joe from the Planning Commission?
Okay, so the Planning Commission met on Tuesday and we gave input on the public art master plan that's being developed. And we were told we're going to meet on the 24th. And I believe it's 2 Condit Road PDs are being updated. And so we'll be reviewing that. I don't believe it's finalized and we're taking action. I think it's just update. Brittany, you can help me maybe there.
Yes, you're correct, Joe. We're coming for a workshop, actually.
Okay.
Mhm.
And we had our first new member in several years. Was at his first meeting.
Fantastic. Brittany, economic development. Seems like there's a lot of groundbreaking going on in the city, a lot of events, certainly some discussion about the budget in the San Jose Mercury. Um, why don't you give us an update from an economic development perspective of the city?
Sure. I'll touch on several different things. Thank you, Chamber of Commerce, for the support for the opening for Chick-fil-A. They are such a wonderful family, and they've just been going gangbusters since they've opened the doors. So very thrilled to be in the community and to have them as great community supporters. So we had that open. Grocery Outlet is a member of the chamber, so they're still on track for July 17th, I believe is what they're thinking about. June 26th, we have the opening where the prior Urban Ranch was. So that's going to be Hiram and Diana, locally owned, and it's going to be a home store, unique gifts. So really, really excited to see that space come alive again. It's been empty for a while. We have had significant interest in Chacho's, the prior Chacho's location. So if you've gone by, they have a bunch of flyers in the windows. It's called Pre-Hispanic MX Cuisine. They were actually food truck operators that are now moving into a brick and mortar, which is very, very exciting for us. So those are the ones I can talk about. It's always so difficult because we have so many other things happening that we just can't share at this point, but lots of other exciting things coming up in the pipeline as far as openings go. And then I'm not sure how many of you were at the new firehouse opening. They had hundreds of people there and it was a wonderful celebration. People still talking about it, just really, really great positive community attendance and feedback at that. Moving over to, as Joe mentioned, the economic development team is moving forward with some updates to the Condit Road PDs. So there's actually 2 of them. There's one on the north, which has the auto dealers, and there's one to the south, which is across from the sports complex. So I've connected with Nick, and I believe we're going to come back at the July meeting and kind of give an update. We'll do a workshop at the Planning Commission on June 24th, and then come and give some presentations, go back to the Planning Commission with a formal presentation, followed by a presentation to City Council. So we probably will make it, that timeline will be June 24th all the way through maybe September 3rd council meeting is kind of what we're thinking. But the main reasons behind the PD updates were all of our work plan is based off of the 2017 economic development blueprint. That was reaffirmed earlier this year in 2025 by the council. And really what these changes are going to do is really support tourism, sales tax, retail, kind of as we talk about the budget, right? Increasing fiscal sustainability through TOT tax and sales tax. So that's really the main driver, is basically opening the barriers that are on those 2 PDs to allow additional development and investment there. We are also working through a disability access grant. So as part of your business license, the state actually takes this, I think it's $4, and they set that aside, and then they actually give it back to the city for us to then reinvest in assisting with disability access for the small businesses, or for any business really, however we want to put that program together. So we're really leaning heavily on a program that San Jose has launched out. And basically what we're doing is taking the pocket of money that has people have been putting back into from the state, and taking that and saying, okay, looking at CASP inspections, like we are encouraging people, small businesses, to get a CASP inspector, to get that report, to give it back to us, and that's something we would reimburse through them. So it's kind of a phased process that we're doing. We're almost to the finish line, but just kind of daylighting it now. You should see that rolling out pretty soon after this. I'm happy to report that for our Renaissance Entrepreneurship Program, we had the first Spanish-speaking class cohort kickoff last week, and we had 22 attendees.
Great.
Super, yes, very, very excited about that attendance and growing. The school district was so wonderful. They offered some childcare, so we had about 5 children there, with others saying, hey, I might need some extra help this week. So wonderful. Thank you, Rotary, for hosting food for them. So we offered food and childcare and a wonderful curriculum. So happy with that and moving forward. And Matt will be back on Monday. Yay.
Oh, wonderful.
Yes, he's very much looking forward to coming back. He seems like he's very positive and in good spirits. And so really excited to have him jump back on the team. And I'm sure he'll be running fast on Monday and his head will be spinning with all the updates. I'm happy to give a PBIT update if Larry wanted me to do that, or I can stop.
No, go ahead.
Okay. All right. So kicking over to the property-based improvement district. We, most importantly, Sidewalk Saturdays is going to launch this Saturday. So that's going to be, we'll do a partial closure of 3rd Street like we've done in the prior year. There'll be live music at the Oak Tree. I believe Gabby's got 50 vendors, 45 or 50 vendors lined up for that. We've been doing some heavy promotions, really excited to kick off the season. Next Thursday on June 19th, we're doing a very similar format, and it's one of our first twilight markets. So that will be from 4 to 8. So it's kind of an evening market. Less vendors there, probably about 20 to 30 vendors, but this is in partnership with the Bay Area Panthers. So the Panthers are doing the partial closure of 3rd Street. They're rolling out the green turf in the middle and doing all kinds of football activities and games for the kids. They're doing meet and greets with the player and signings and ticket sales and all kinds of things. So we're really throwing it together as a kickoff to summer block party downtown. And again, that's next Thursday from 4 to 8. In addition to that, the larger projects looking at the median tree lighting is finished. So now working with the Downtown Association to see what that means for those sidewalk trees that are on either side of Monterey Road. And then looking at still moving forward with the research and development of the design for the Downtown Gateway Arch. And that's it. Thank you.
Any questions for either Joe or Brittany? Brittany, with all the development that's going on from a housing perspective, you look at North Monterey Corridor, you look at Mission View and Half, you look at Tenet and Butterfield, a lot of groundbreakings. Any idea what that's going to do to the population of the city?
I mean, we have a steady growth at 2%. There hasn't been a lot of conversation about what all of those opening and being tenanted might mean. I mean, I think we're holding pretty much at the 2%, but that's a good question, Rick. I don't know. I could ask John Lang and get back to the group. No problem.
Yeah, I'd be curious.
Yeah, but to your point, we don't have single people moving into those, right? For the most part, it's younger families moving in. So you're talking about 2, 3, 4 people in each of those. So my guess would be maybe it doubles it, but I'm not 100%. I'll ask John Lang and I'll circle back with Nick.
Okay, sounds great. John, any update from Morgan Hill Unified School District?
I'd be happy to. I mean, there's always a lot going on, so try and keep it most relevant to this group. I'll touch briefly on the housing one because this comes up from time to time, and its effect in particular on our enrollment. And what we continue to see is that the rapid pace of housing development is resulting in our enrollment being about flat. Both conventional public schools and charter schools north and south of us are contracting, closing campuses, pulling back because of declining enrollment. We're, plus or minus 100 students of where we were a decade ago. And, what we're seeing is that there are fewer children per household. That's a well-known trend throughout the developed world. But it is creating additional challenges because kind of where the population clusters are, particularly as some of these newer complexes go in. You know, it's a larger, denser thing all in one place, often in places like Royal Oaks, say off of Tennant, that previously had no children there. It was a mushroom farm, right? So, and in fact, like our boundary map was a little unclear, like what's the default school for those kids, because last time that boundary map was looked at 20 years ago, that wasn't really a top of mind question for the people that did it. But so that's, you know, it comes up periodically in the community. People will say, I see houses and condos being built everywhere. OMG, where are the new schools? Well, we still see no indication either from, you know, what's actually transpiring, or, you know, we spend a lot of money with the demographer every year to look at that and exactly who, what, where. And I'll say, fortunately, it's keeping us roughly flat, because when communities have rapidly declining enrollment, again, which is very common throughout our county, you end up closing locations, which is massively disruptive, both in reality and in the political sphere. Nobody wants their neighborhood school closed. I hope to never be in the middle of having to make that decision. I know friends in other districts that have had to. That's just horrible. Anyhow, so there's that. And then kind of back to more immediate things, you know, promotion and graduation season just concluded for us. Last night we had the community adult school graduation. If you only go to one high school graduation, go to that one. We should put the invitation out more broadly. You know, we had, I think, 28 graduates last night, but these are adults who something happened along the way that kept them from getting their high school diploma on the usual cycle, and through commitment and effort and support have gone back and done it, and they share their stories, and it's an amazing thing. But just so many of our students of all ages are doing amazing things thanks to amazing support from the teachers and other staff that support them. It's just a wonderful time of year that way. Much more fun than going to board meetings. And other things, it's heavy maintenance season for our school. Some of the things, if you go by Live Oak, you'll see finally the parking lot is being completely repaved, the main student parking lot, which is also how you get back to the fields that a lot of community users use. So that's underway. At the adult school, we have, you know, roof and AC repairs going on at Martin Murphy, which is in our district, but in San Jose. Complete repaint of the exterior, something it's needed for, at least a decade, and kind of a refresh of the admin welcome area coming in. So, you know, we have literally, you know, $1 billion of identified facilities needs across our 14 school sites. And we don't have anything like that, but we're doing what we can. And that's something that happens in the summer. And also kind of chamber related, our career education continues to grow and expand. We had many hundreds of we call CTE completers this year. That's students who've taken at least a 3-course pathway. It might be in culinary, it might be in construction, you know, all different fields. And anyone with an interest in that, you know, love to arrange some tours and whatnot, because a lot of folks think, oh, you know, like shop and cooking classes are gone. Not gone at all. Actually, they're more vibrant now than they were when I got into this 7 years ago. So that's going well. Farm tech, some of you have heard about our ongoing efforts around that. So at the Sobrato school site, we have 20 acres that have been lightly used. The FFA has been using them for some animal work, but our student nutrition department has taken on the project of turning that into additional growing fields to grow foods, you know, to use in our schools. That's what's different about how we do that compared to others, but also kind of a community spaces, a little somewhat similar in concept to what I think that Tariffs is working on, you know, not competitive with that, but, you know, some paved outdoor space, some place to have gatherings, and particularly integrate students and schools into that as part of the community. Have kids know where food comes from, and have the community know what's going on at our schools is amazing. And then I guess I'll mention the summer school is about to start in the middle of June. That's about a 5-week program, primarily for students looking to do some catch-up work, but there are also some enrichment programs there. And also later this year, we'll have our 9th grade connection, which really encourage all incoming 9th graders. It's a 1-day kind of program at what's going to be their high school. Get introduced, get the feel of it. You know, have some mentoring by upper class students and connections. I wish every student took advantage of that. I think we probably had about a third of our incoming class last year do it, and everyone that does it, reports it's very advantageous. When I've talked to the kids, I say, "Why are you here?" Because mom and dad said I had to. It's not necessarily something they sign up for, but it's really valuable. And I'll say, I often I think the students who might benefit the most, well, maybe they're not the ones who are being pushed by family members to be there. So if you know anybody, with a rising ninth grader, tell them, hey, it's one day, it's free, they'll feed you, it's fun, and it's just great to then come onto campus, a few weeks later, kind of ready to go and like, oh, I know how it works around here. Okay, that's enough. Thank you.
Well, thank you, John. Alex, open space. I think we've had some additions.
Yes, we have, and there's more coming. So I don't know if you've heard that BART is coming to South County. Have you heard that? And
Is that your duck? Bart the duck?
Bart the duck? Don't know that one. Anyway, on May 30th, we had a celebration of 14.5 miles of the BART extension, the Bay Area Ridge Trail.
Oh.
Now we get it. So, but from an economic standpoint, that's a big deal, and it might be worth a presentation either at this venue or a breakfast. It's a 550-mile trail system that's been in the works since the mid-1990s. And we've completed over 400 miles of it. Actually, we only have about 100 miles to go. And a lot of it comes through South County. And in this case, it actually surrounds Morgan Hill. So have any of you heard about the Ridge Trail? Know what it is?
Yes.
Yeah. And the economic impact is huge. And for the areas that have already completed the Ridge Trail, mainly in Contra Costa, Alameda, San Francisco, San Mateo counties, Napa. So it's a trail system that literally goes around the whole Bay Area. Across the Golden Gate Bridge, comes back over the Martinez Bridge, comes back down all the way on the Diablo Range down to Gilroy and back up through our trail, and we're going to make a spur of it when the El Toro Trail opens up. Hopefully that'll be an attraction. It won't be part of the Ridge Trail, but it'll be a spur of the Ridge Trail, and it'll actually have campsites along it, and people are coming from all over the country to visit this Ridge Trail. And of course, they're not all campers, so they're going to stop in communities along the Ridge Trail, and of which Morgan Hill is one of the few communities that has it coming both north and south. So there's something to be said about that. So I look forward to being able to tell more about it in a future date.
Okay. Any other updates? I think we lost Nick. He said his internet at the granary is down, so he's not with us right now. Steve, anything else from Chamber of Commerce perspective?
Nothing from Chamber except tomorrow night is Friday Night Music Series #1. It's the big opening night tomorrow. Hope to see all your bright, shiny faces tomorrow night. Should be a well-attended event, and I believe there will be 11 Friday Night Music Series events over the course of the next few months. It's a lot of work putting together and tearing down and doing it all over again, but it's really worth it, and everybody has a great time. So hope to see you there tomorrow. Last Saturday in Beverly Hills, I did the KABC TV show on moving scams. It's moving season, and everyone should be aware on that. I'd love to be able to do maybe some of these types of scams and stories on locksmiths are big right now. Towing companies are huge right now with a lot of scams. And our local community should know about at least how to prevent yourself from becoming a victim. And last is, of course, we are from a Better Business Bureau standpoint of Los Angeles, there's a lot of imposters starting back with the fires. And some of those have crept up into our area here. Imposters as of contractors portraying themselves as insurance people, consultants for permits. So a lot of scams going on around there, including here in our South Bay area. So be careful of imposters. We see them on the internet and on your texts and your emails all day long. So with that, Rick, that's it. I just hope to see everybody tomorrow night. Have a great weekend.
Okay. With that, thank you, everybody. Thank you for attending today's Economic Development Committee meeting, and we'll see you next month. Thank you.